not to state the obvious, but we all know what makes MH370 different from the other, aviation disasters. It's been more than 10 years now, and still, they haven't located the plane, the aircraft. So that, is completely different. We've never seen anything like that before. So, and even, as recent as last month, I've been hearing news about how the Malaysian government is planning to restart the search and pay the company only if they actually find the aircraft. So there's so much uncertainty. So living with that uncertainty, right? That it's hard to imagine what that is like. And how did you manage that, and how do you actually cope with the lack of closure?
Yeah, I understand that. Look, I've always believed that there's a cycle of life, and the day you're born, there's going to be a end date and expiry date. So in that sense, there was always a certain understanding, a certain acceptance that we don't have an infinite tenure on this planet in this life. So to that extent, I think there was a certain willingness to accept the possibility that somebody who was very dear to you may not be around any longer. So that was one part of it. I lost my father quite early in life. So I've encountered some of this fairly early, and I've sort of lived through that, and I was quite confident that the forces of life are not going to forsake me, and that if I've come this far, I can go the distance. So there was some level of confidence that it's in some plane. So while there was a certainty that we all see when somebody dies, and I'm not getting into euphemisms of somebody passing and so on. People die. That's the reality. When somebody dies, there's a finality about it. Okay, and you may take your time to work through it, but there is no prospect of a turn back from somebody who's already gone. And I think with MH370, the difficulty that I think me and many others have encountered is not just the fact of loss, but actually the reality of not knowing what really happened, who or what caused the disappearance of the plane, where might it be, and what might have been the last moments if indeed it met its end. Now, it posed many difficulties. Do we speak about somebody who's no longer with us in the past tense? Okay. Do we keep it as a provisional? For example, for a long time, I would say, yeah, I lost my wife, which is true. Factually and literally, it's true. We lost her. That was the kind of settlement I made with myself in the language that I used. Which is just factually correct. We lost. So there are various devices that one had to use to sort of come to terms with the fact that there is somebody who is very dear to us who is not around, and also that we don't know. I believe, and it's become clearer to me more recently, that actually closure has two components, according to me. And for instance, many of us, I think we have moved on. I think we're not stricken by grief any longer. All right? There is not the pall of gloom, of melancholy, of grieving, and a sense of loss that permeates every moment. No more. That's the fact. But that we still don't quite know rankles. It's like you puzzle over it over and over. And every time there is some news, okay, which promises or heads towards, in some direction, towards knowing what may have happened, you perk up, you start looking up, and you start reading up, and you start getting engaged all over again. And then nothing really happened, nothing moves. And I think this aspect of closure, a comprehensive closure, I think perhaps can only come if eventually we do know what happened with some certainty, with some credible evidence. All right. And if that happens, I think we can put some things to rest. Otherwise, it's like, letting something, be suspended. And, you're not entirely at peace. I think it's perhaps fundamental to human beings to be curious, I suspect, and to want to know, to puzzle over things. And I have a feeling this is another instance where it's a challenge to many things. A challenge to science. It's a challenge to politics. It's a challenge to national security issues. It's many challenges that are sort of simultaneously at play in trying to figure out what really happened. And there are commercial interests as well. It's a challenge to commercial interests. So many issues that come together in this. So yeah, so in that sense, I think closure, I also believe, for instance, that closure is actually a matter of choice. Right? Some aspects of closure are a matter of choice. Even with the certainty of somebody passing away, I may simply refuse to accept the fact and be steeped in nostalgia, be steeped in memory, in recall, and so on, and not accept the reality that this person is not around anymore. And that's why I'm saying it's also a choice to say, okay, all good things come to an end. And I'm putting a lid on it. I'm closing this chapter. I move on.
Now, you mentioned, curiosity, right? It's a very human thing. And so how did you deal with those two different worlds? Meaning you are in this world where, you've lost your wife, but, the rest of the world, yes, we all grieved for a bit, but then the focus shifted to, what happened, especially with all the rumors and, I feel bad putting it this way. It became a very interesting, curious story for the rest of the world, right? So you are here, and then the rest of the world is, at a different plane, right? So how is it? How do you deal with that?
Okay. I have 2-3 things to say. One, personally, I'm reconciled to the possibility that I may never know in my lifetime. All right? Because even where to look for the aircraft has been largely probabilistic. There's no certainty. If we knew where to look for it, by now we would have found it. Okay? And so maybe there'll be hit and misses a few times. We've already had those episodes. And maybe it might continue for a little longer till somebody says, I don't think, good money needs to chase bad causes. All right? We don't know. So in some ways, I'm reconciled to this fact that I may never know, but eventually, I also believe someday we will know. Okay, so that's one part of this. The second, I think, is that I think far too much emphasis has been placed on the affected families need to know. Right? And so oftentimes, the families come to the forefront, or they're pitched forth into the up and center, and then many things are said and done around it. The fact of the matter is, this is a commercial aircraft, in an international flight, lost on an international route for reasons we yet don't know, even 10 years down the road. And anytime during this 10 years, it's remained a question unanswered, right? It's a fact, it's unanswered. So it's not, and I always wonder, wouldn't the public, wouldn't people at large really want to pursue this to its logical end and find out and to know? There is a question of safety that is lurking. There is a challenge to safety that's lurking. There's a challenge to security that's lurking. Okay, that's unanswered. There is a possibility of a recurrence if we don't know what caused it in the first place. So, to me, more and more over the years, I've seen it less and less as a matter for the families to be satisfied, to be appeased, for their anxieties and their needs to be put to rest, as much as an issue that concerns every person who takes a flight sometime in their life. And what I'm intrigued by is there's actually not as much curiosity as I would expect. Not either anymore, let's put it this way. Even the media comes alive about 6 weeks before the anniversary. Okay, and then the stories start rolling. We see that. Okay, invariably, the authorities have a free pass, or they are impregnable as far as access is concerned. They simply are not held to account. So they become human stories or investigative pieces which doesn't add a bit to what we already know. So many of them, most of them, end up regurgitating, the whole saga from March 8th, 2014,
right,
and then add, every year that passes, there'll be some new angle, a new theory, a new conspiracy, a new actor who kind of gets into the fray. Everybody has a little airtime, some, print space, and then it moves on. So, it's but it's business as usual, frankly. If you look back over the last few years, it's business as usual. The airline industry couldn't care. All right. Collectively, I have not heard anything from any of the airline honchos. Okay. Anybody connected to the airline industry, couldn't care. Governments don't even, I think, remember. Right, including the governments of the passengers from 14 countries. We had, I think, passengers were from 14 nationalities. Those governments don't seem to even remember, right? So, I don't know. I'm beginning to also have doubts about, what are people curious about, and in fact, once in a while, it used to be very, it used to anger me at some time when people would ask me, what's the latest? Or, has a plane been found? Or some such thing. And the people, well-meaning people, friends, people in the family. And so I would be quite tempted to say, just pick the newspapers, just Google, just search on the net, and you will have information. Okay, there's this belief that in the families have more information and more valid information than is otherwise available from other sources. This is a myth. The families quite often have, have received short shrift from the authorities. So, yeah, those are things that are realities of what you see on a daily basis.
Yeah, that must be difficult. Like, what do you know that we don't know, right? Uh, now, you mentioned, I mean, you expressed confidence that the aircraft would in fact be located one day, and you know, and I believe that too. Especially, you've probably heard this, but a couple of months ago, there was news about how a team thinks that they may have located Amelia Earhart's plane, which went missing in 1937. It's going to be 100 years soon, right? So yeah, so I'm confident too. But to your point, yes, I don't know if it'll be too late by then. Right, and so, but all this happening, right? Are there any moments that stood out for you in terms of unexpected grace? Any anecdotes from friends or even strangers that that just stood out for you in a positive way?
I understand the question, but I've not allowed encounters to linger longer than they need to. So and and the experience has been that there have been countless instances where people have reached out, either with words or just simply a minute that they sat next to you in silence. There are people who've written in response to something that I may have posted on my blog or in social media, and very kind words, thoughtful words, very well-meaning gestures. So they've been actually from across the world, to be honest, not just India, but across the world. Many have reached out to with a hand of friendship, and they continued, even if I've not met them, they've continued to be very, very close, intimate friends. So I'm unable to sort of put my finger and say this was something that stood out for me, or a particular encounter stood out for me. I have simply been awash with a lot of love, a lot of support, and a lot of goodwill from most unexpected quarters, from most unexpected parts of the world, frankly. So the one thing that stands out is the fact that our own government has never thought it fit to reach out. That's very odd, according to me, and probably not even legally an acceptable position. So that's the way things are.